My name is Daniel. I'm 29 now and I still can't fully explain what happened that night. I've told myself for years that it's over, that I was just a scared kid imagining too much. But that's not true. What happened was real. And even now, all these years later, I still can't stand the sound of quiet houses. This happened when I was 16 in a town just outside Des Moines, Iowa. A quiet place that never made the news, the kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other out of habit and left their cars unlocked because nothing bad ever happens here. I used to believe that too. It was late October, one of those weeks when the sun vanishes before dinner and the air smells like dry leaves and smoke from someone else's fireplace down the street. I remember the feeling in the air that day, not fear, just that strange, heavy stillness that comes right before winter really starts. My parents were supposed to spend the night helping my uncle fix a broken water heater 2 towns over. They'd left after dinner, promising to be home the next morning. I'd stayed behind. I had an early shift at the grocery store and a test Monday morning, so I told them I'd be fine. I liked being alone back then. I liked the silence. Before they left, my mom did her usual checklist. Doors locked, lights off downstairs, no food left out. Then my dad, always trying to sound casual, gave his standard reminder. If anyone knocks, don't answer, just call us, all right? He said it like it was a joke, but his voice didn't sound like one. After they drove off, the house settled into its evening rhythm. The heater kicked on with a low hum. The TV glow flickered across the living room wall, and I made myself a frozen pizza. The ordinary details are what I remember most clearly. That's what makes it all worse, how completely normal it felt at first. I spent a couple of hours playing Xbox, then switched to YouTube. I remember watching old clips, people messing around with fireworks, prank videos, the kind of nonsense that used to make me laugh. Around 11:30, I turned off the TV and went upstairs to my room. The house was silent again. I don't know if you've ever been alone in a 2-story house at night, but there's something about that silence that's different from any other kind. It's not peaceful, it's aware of you. Every creak sounds deliberate, every faint noise feels like a response. Still, I wasn't nervous. I'd done this before. I brushed my teeth, plugged my phone in, and sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through messages I'd already read 3 times. Nothing unusual, no sense of danger. Then, at 12:04 a.m., there was a knock at the front door. Not a random bang, not a neighbor's noise. A clear, intentional knock. 3 short taps, evenly spaced. I froze for a second, waiting for another sound. Nothing. My first thought was maybe a delivery driver at the wrong address, but that didn't make sense. It was past midnight. No one delivered packages at that hour. Then, after about 10 seconds, there was another knock. Same rhythm. That's when I put my phone down. I listened. No movement outside, no car engine, no voice. I started walking slowly toward the stairs, careful not to make the old wood creak. From the top step, I could see the front entryway, just the faint outline of the door under the nightlight glow from the hallway. Then came a third knock, slower, firmer, and a voice. "Hey, I see you." It was a man's voice, calm, deep, not angry, not threatening, but the calmness is what made it wrong. I stopped breathing for a second. The curtains were drawn, the lights were off. There was no possible way he could see me from outside, but he said it like he could. I stood perfectly still at the top of the stairs, waiting for something. Another voice, another sound, but there was nothing. Just the faint hum of the heater somewhere below. Then he spoke again. "Open the door!" Still the same voice, still calm. I turned off my phone screen so the light wouldn't show through the banister. I took one slow step down the stairs, then another. My heart was hammering so hard, it felt like it was shaking the house. From halfway down, I could see the narrow, frosted window beside the door. The kind that blurs shapes, but not movement. Someone was standing there, tall, shoulders slightly hunched, head tilted forward. Close, too close to the glass. No one stands that close unless they're listening. I stepped back against the wall, out of sight. My hands were sweating so much that I almost dropped my phone. The man didn't move. Then, after what felt like forever, he spoke again. "I know your parents aren't home." The way he said it, not a question, not a guess, a statement, like he'd seen them leave, like he'd been waiting. My skin went cold all over. I don't remember thinking, I just remember moving toward the kitchen phone. It was mounted on the wall, one of those beige landlines everyone used to have. I picked it up and pressed it to my ear. The dial tone buzzed steady. I started dialing 911, but I stopped halfway. My thumb hovered over the last number. The shadow outside hadn't moved. The voice was silent now. I thought maybe I could peek through the side window, just enough to see a car or anything. But when I leaned forward, the shape on the other side shifted. Not walking, just adjusting slightly, like he'd felt me move. That's when I realized he wasn't guessing. He knew where I was in the house. Then came the voice again, quieter this time. "Daniel." That single word snapped everything in my head. He knew my name. I dropped the phone. It hit the counter and swung by the cord. I backed away, heart pounding so hard it hurt. How could he know my name? I hadn't spoken. The lights were off. The front door was locked. There was no way. For a few seconds, I thought maybe it was someone I knew playing a prank. But the voice didn't sound like anyone I knew. It was older, slower, controlled. I crouched behind the kitchen island, staring at the faint shape through the frosted glass. I couldn't see details, but I could see that he hadn't moved. Then, almost whispering, "You shouldn't leave your basement window open." It took me a full second to understand what he'd said. Earlier that day, I'd gone down to the basement to grab a soda and cracked that little window to air out the damp smell. I'd thought I'd closed it, now I wasn't sure. My stomach dropped. Every part of me wanted to pretend I hadn't heard him, but the words were still echoing in my head. I forced myself to move. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer by the fridge and started toward the basement door. The handle felt cold. The door was half open. I was sure I'd closed it earlier. I pushed it shut and locked it. But my mind wouldn't have stopped repeating one question. What if he's already inside? I didn't want to check. Every part of me said not to, but I couldn't just leave it. So I unlocked the door again and stepped down the first few stairs. The air changed immediately, cooler, heavier, the kind of air that holds its breath. I stopped halfway down and lifted the flashlight. The beam shook in my hand. At first, everything looked normal. The washer, the stacked boxes, the half-finished laundry basket. Then my eyes caught on the window. From a distance it looked closed, but the light caught something. A faint smudge across the glass, like a sleeve had brushed it. Near the bottom corner, the dust had been disturbed, leaving a clean streak and what looked like half a fingerprint. It was fresh. I stood there for a long second, the light trembling. Then I turned and went back up the stairs as fast as I could, locking the door behind me. The shadow by the front door was gone. The house was silent again, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. I didn't think. I just picked up the phone again and started to dial. This time I didn't stop halfway. The numbers on the phone blurred as I pressed them. My hands were shaking too hard to control. When the line connected, I didn't even wait for the full greeting. "There's someone outside," I said. My voice sounded strange, small. "He knows my name. He said my basement window is open." The dispatcher's tone stayed calm, almost unnervingly so, trained for panic. She asked for the address, my name, my age. I answered each question automatically, words spilling out in short bursts. "Are you in a safe room?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "The kitchen. I locked the doors." "Stay there," she said. "Officers are on their way. Don't go near any windows." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. The phone cord stretched tight between my hand and the wall. I crouched behind the counter again, heart hammering against the tile. The shadow near the front door was gone now, but that didn't comfort me. It meant I didn't know where he was. The dispatcher kept me talking. asking questions about what I'd seen, what I'd heard. But her voice felt far away, like she was speaking through fog. Every few seconds I looked toward the frosted glass, half expecting the shape to return. It didn't. Then, from the back of the house, something changed. The curtain behind the sliding door moved, just slightly, the fabric pushing inward, like someone was standing too close. "He's at the back," I whispered into the phone. "Stay calm, Daniel," she said immediately. "Officers are close. Keep the line open. Don't move." I could barely hold the receiver. My palm left damp marks on the plastic. The next few minutes stretched longer than anything I'd ever lived through. I didn't move. I didn't breathe properly. I just listened. To the air, to the stillness, to the faint static on the phone. Then finally light flashed outside, blue and red washing over the curtains. "They're here," the dispatcher said. "Do not open the door until they identify themselves." A loud knock followed, then voices. "Police!" I didn't wait. I ran to the front hallway, stopped only when I saw the uniforms through the glass. 2 officers, flashlights sweeping the porch. I opened the door just enough for them to see me, then stepped back. One entered while the other circled the side of the house. "Stay right here," the first one said. "We'll check everything." They moved fast, scanning corners, opening doors, checking windows. Their lights cut across the walls, making the house look unfamiliar. A few minutes later, the officer from outside came back through the front. "We found prints," he said. "Front steps, side yard, and near the back door. There's something by the basement window too." They both went to look. I followed at a distance, stopping in the hallway. The basement window had streaks on the glass, faint smudges, but visible under their flashlights. One of them crouched down, examining the corner. "There's a partial handprint here," he said quietly. "Looks fresh." The other officer nodded, then looked up at me. "Did he try to break in?" "No," I said. "He just talked." They asked more questions. How tall he seemed, how close, what he said exactly. I told them everything I could remember. When I repeated the part about him saying my name, both officers glanced at each other. "Did you recognize the voice?" one asked. "No," I said. "Could it have been someone you know from school? A neighbor?" "No, it didn't sound familiar. It didn't sound like anyone." They stayed for nearly an hour, checking every door, every lock, every possible way in. Nothing was broken, nothing stolen, no sign of forced entry. Before leaving, one of them wrote his number on a card and told me to call if anything else happened. "We'll patrol the area tonight," he said. "You're probably safe now, but keep the doors locked." Probably. When they left, the silence returned like a weight. I locked the door behind them and just stood there, staring at the frosted glass that had shown that man's shadow earlier. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop. I kept replaying his words. "You shouldn't leave your basement window open." He knew, not guessed, knew. I barely slept that night. Every sound, every creak, every shift in air felt like a warning. By morning, when my parents came home, I must have looked different. My mom's face changed the second she saw me. I told them everything, or at least tried to. My dad listened quietly, then walked through the house, checking every lock himself. He didn't say much, just kept moving from room to room, testing the windows twice. The police called that afternoon. They hadn't found anyone nearby, no reports, no suspicious vehicles, no clear prints to run. That was the official end of it. But it didn't end. Not really. The days after felt like I was living in someone else's house. Every window, every reflection, every open door made my chest tighten. I went to school, pretended to be fine, laughed at things that weren't funny. But nights were different. I'd stay awake long after my parents slept, listening to the quiet that used to feel safe. The first week passed without incident, then the second. Eventually, life crept back to normal, or what passed for normal, until one Friday night, about 3 weeks later. I was walking home from my shift at the grocery store. It was around 10. The streets were mostly empty, just the hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. The houses along my street all looked the same, glowing from within like safe little boxes. When I turned the corner toward my block, I noticed something that made me stop. The porch light at our house was off. My parents always left it on when they knew I'd be coming home late. Always. At first, I told myself maybe the bulb had burned out, but the closer I got, the less sense it made. The curtains were closed, but I could see the faint flicker of the living room lamp through them. Someone had turned it on. I hesitated at the walkway. My key was in my hand, but I didn't use it. I just stood there, staring at the house that suddenly felt wrong. Then, faintly from inside, I saw movement, a shadow passing by the hallway. I froze. I knew both my parents were gone that night. They'd gone to a dinner 2 towns over. I was supposed to have the house to myself. The shadow passed again. I didn't go in. I called my dad instead. He didn't pick up. I called again. Nothing. Finally, I stepped back toward the streetlight, far enough to see the whole house. The front window reflected just enough light for me to see my own faint reflection. And behind it, for a split second, what looked like a face. Not pressed to the glass this time, just there, watching. I ran. I called the police from the end of the block, barely able to form sentences. By the time they arrived, the house was empty, doors locked, nothing taken, no sign of forced entry. But the porch light switch, the one inside by the door, was flipped off. After that night, something changed in me permanently. I stopped trusting silence. I stopped believing in safety that could be locked or switched on. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing else happened, but the tension never faded. I'd catch myself glancing toward the windows at random times, in daylight, in crowds, even in other houses. And sometimes, when I'd look long enough, I'd swear I could see something move. Not a person, just that familiar shift in the corner of vision. The same posture, the same patience. I tried convincing myself it was trauma. My parents thought so too. They sent me to therapy, made me talk through it. "He's gone," they'd say. "You're safe." But that's the thing. I never saw him leave. Years went by. I finished school, moved out, got a job. Different apartment, different town. For a long time it worked. Until last year, I was unpacking boxes in my new place. A quiet apartment on the edge of town. The kind of quiet I used to hate but had learned to tolerate. Around 9 p.m. I went down to the shared laundry room in the basement. It was empty. Just rows of machines and that faint echo of footsteps that always sound closer than they are. As I bent down to load a washer, something on the wall caught my eye. A notice board, and pinned to it, a small yellowed scrap of paper. It was an old maintenance notice, probably left by the last tenant. But someone had written something on it in pen, in small, deliberate letters. "You shouldn't leave your basement window open." The handwriting was different from mine, but the words, exact. I stood there staring at it, heart slowing into that old rhythm again. The quiet basement, the hum of distant air, the way time seemed to stop for a few seconds. It had been 13 years since that night. I never told anyone that specific sentence, not once, and someone had written it. I didn't finish the laundry. I went upstairs, locked my door, and didn't sleep. That's where I'll stop, because everything after that doesn't feel like a story. It feels like waiting. People always ask what scares me most about that night. The answer's simple. It's not the knocking, not the handprint, not even the voice. It is that calm tone. The kind of voice that doesn't need to yell because it already knows it is being heard. And every time I'm alone and the house gets quiet enough, I find myself listening again, not for noise, but for silence. That sharp, perfect silence that always came right before he spoke. If you've listened all the way to the end, thank you. This story was inspired by real accounts of home intrusions that left survivors questioning what safety really means. If stories like this keep you up at night, or if you listen to them because they remind you that fear is real, make sure to subscribe to Mr.Ebon Horror Real Stories. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who loves true horror, and leave a comment telling us what part of this story stayed with you. And remember, if someone ever knocks after midnight, don't answer. Just don't.